To episode 2 of our Corona series, Flip Classroom videos. And hopefully you watched the last one. I know it was a little long, a little clunky. I hope for this one to make it just a little bit better and a little more user-friendly. So what I want you to do first is, if you have not taken a look at your Romanesque Art note packet that you picked up last week, please take a look and read through at least the first 2 pages of that before we even start to go through, or before you start to even go through this video. If you don't have it, I have it on the Google Classroom. It's one of the attachments. So take a look at it, and it looks like this: Romanesque Art, blah, 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 goes through the intro, and I'll be talking about some of it. But it's really good foundational knowledge of what you need to know as we get into this next unit. And short unit, or short chapter, should I say, not unit. Short chapter, and I'm gonna break it up into 2 videos for this one. So first video will be kind of an intro, and then the second video will be kind of going more into the specific pieces of Romanesque art. All right. So what I want you to think about first is this do now question. So obviously, as of right now, we are not doing do nows. If we stay out of school longer, I may be doing them. I might be having you guys be required to submit them to me on a daily or semi-daily basis. But I want you to think about this before we even start. In what ways did the Romans influence churches of the early Middle Ages? And then number 2, what was a pilgrimage? Why did they increase, you believe, maybe during this period? And 3, why do you believe stone vaults, which are stone ceilings, why do you think they will replace a timber roof? Why would they replace a timber roof? So hit pause, think about those questions for a few minutes, and then get back to me with the answers. All right, hopefully you hit pause, thought about these. So let's talk about the answers to this. So in what ways did the Romans influence churches? So remember, the earliest churches are based off of Roman basilicas, big meeting areas. Christians met together, okay? Number 2, what was a pilgrimage? A pilgrimage is a journey to a holy site that is usually taken by the faithful of whichever religion that they may be journeying to. We've seen that with Islam. We've seen it with Native American art, and we've seen it with some other religions that we've looked at. Christians are not exempt from this. And we're going to talk about the second half of number 2. Why would these people be going on pilgrimage, and why would they be increasing during this era? And then for number 3, why do you think stone roofs replaced timber roofs? Well, pretty practical. The main reason why is the old Roman basilicas all had wooden roofs that could burn down. If you think of the lighting sources of this era, they were using candles, they were using oil lamps. Very, very flammable. All right. I wish they would have taken that into account with Notre Dame. Know what I'm saying? All right. Anyway, on to something better. So this era is called Romanesque art. This is really right around the time of the very first millennium. So we are still in the Middle Ages. This is around the year 1000. The most dominant force in the Middle Ages is the Catholic Church. And we are going to really focus on art that is based around the Catholic Church. We're going to see how art really evolves in Western Europe, which is, the area of the Roman Empire that fell apart, and how the church will continue to influence life, architecture, and art. So it gets the name Romanesque because these buildings are continuing that Roman-like architecture, okay? Big, imposing pieces of architecture, which we didn't necessarily really see see very often in other areas of Europe. Yes, we saw it in Rome with St. Peter's Basilica, Old St. Peter's Basilica, and some of the Byzantine churches that were created under Justinian, like in cities like Ravenna, like San Vitale. But in other areas of Europe, you just did not see these large-scale building projects. So we're going to see them start to ramp up in the very late 900s into the year 1000, and then really go into high gear when we get to Gothic art. So if you take a look at this map, these are the dominant areas of Europe around the year 1100. Okay, so you got the Holy Roman Empire, France, the Muslim empires are still dominating southern Spain. Remember, if you look at the orange area on the map here, the Islamic Moors are not pushed out until 1492. you have the Norman kingdom of northern France and England. At this point, the French are in control of England around the year 1000, around the year 1100. And we're going to be spending a lot of our time talking about cathedrals in France, the Holy Roman Empire, and then also England. So, one of the things that you see on this map are these purple lines, and they are essentially the pilgrimage routes that Catholics would follow around the year 1000. So, what Catholics believed was that around the turn of the millennium, so around the year 1000, that they believed the world was going to come to an end. And they believed that in order to show their devotion and piety to their Christian faith, they had to go and visit as many churches as possible. So you had really this whole tourism infrastructure pop up throughout major cities in Europe where they would have these large cathedrals just strictly built so that they could essentially hold pilgrims coming to visit the church to see the relics of whichever saint that church was dedicated to. So if you were in England, you would often start in Canterbury, make your way through France, travel down through southern France, and then you would actually enter and go westward into Spain. And the pilgrimage journey ended at a church in the north of Spain called Santiago de Compostela. And this was a church that was dedicated to St. James. He was executed in the year 42 CE by the Roman Emperor Herod, and he was the very first very first of Jesus' apostles to be executed. Okay, and they believe that it was a miracle that his relics, which were pieces of his own body, were brought from Judea, which is modern day Israel, and somehow miraculously ended up in the north of Spain. Okay, so that was the most important saint whose relics were in northern Europe, and that's one of the reasons why the pilgrimage ended at Santiago de Compostela. Now, if you couldn't make it there, it was a long journey. It was very expensive. That was okay, but as long as you attempted to go on this pilgrimage route, they believed that you would be saved when the end of the world happened in the year 1000. So these churches, the reasons why they're so big is going to be so they could handle all of the crowds coming to see these relics. All right. So that's why we have these large scale churches that are bigger than those original basilican plan churches that we saw in the very beginning of Christian art. All right, so when you think of Romanesque art, what comes to mind? So really, I already said this, it's the revitalization of large-scale architecture and sculpture. You want to write that down in your binder. In your binder, hopefully, not only do you have the note packet, but you should also be writing down, ding, 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 that this is Romanesque art, and really highlighting these key pieces of information. All right, since I'm not having you read your textbook, since I'm not having you watch Khan Academy videos, I want you to kind of get the information the same way you would in class. All right, so what are the key aspects of Romanesque art? Really, we're going to see the effects of pilgrimages on architecture. Architecture is going to get bigger. Relics and reliquaries are going to be very ornate. So the boxes and the contraptions that hold the relics of these various saints are going to be inlaid and made out of gold, and just really, really intricate and precious jewels will be used, all to show the importance of the saint whose relics are inside. You will also continue to see the increase in illuminated manuscript paintings and weavings. But the sad part is that this chapter really, at any given time, makes up anywhere from 3 to 7%, and actually probably really hovers more around the 3% of the overall exam. All right, so before we actually get into some of the pieces, let's talk about, well, where are we? So time frame, again, we're around the turn of the very first millennium. There's this connection to Roman art because it's this large-scale building project. There's some lifestyle changes in Europe. You have the rise of relatively powerful regional kings. You have the idea of feudalism, which is where you have a king. Below that, you have lords who own a lot of land. People essentially The peasants do not own the land at all. They work that land, and they will sell the crops that they grow on that land. And they will the lords will come and collect tax money, and with that tax money, they will raise an army to protect people. Remember, that's the whole idea of feudalism back from your freshman year. And the role of men and women in the arts, men, again, are the ones that make most of the art. Women are very rarely seen, even though that some nuns do make manuscripts. And the influence of the Catholic Church cannot be understated. It's the most dominant force and why any art is created in this era. And we're going to see the impact of the Crusades, and we'll talk about what the Crusades are and what their impact is later on. So, what we have here, we have some important images that relate to the Christian faith. If you look at the image on the upper right hand or left hand corner, that is the city of Jerusalem. That is where the Dome of the Rock is. That's a sacred site not just for Christians or not just for Muslims, but also for Jews. It is the same city where the Last Supper took place. And also, if you look to the right, it is the city where the crucifixion of Christ takes place. So, well, why is this city, a city outside of Europe, why is it important? Well, it's the reason for the Crusades. In the middle of the Romanesque era, you will have the Crusades begin. And the Crusades are really a call from the Pope of the Catholic Church, the leader of the Catholic Church in Rome, to go and take back that Holy Land from the Muslims. And what's going to happen is you're going to have the kings of Europe discussing with their lords, and they are going to essentially say, yes, we're going to take on this call from the Pope. We're going to take our military, take the money that we have. We are going to travel from wherever we are in the Middle Ages in Europe. We're going to travel to the Holy Land, and these were very expensive ventures, and we will try to take back this Holy Land from these destructive Muslims. Now, you can discuss and debate whether or not the Crusades were successful. They were not successful in the terms of the Christians never permanently take back the Holy Land, but they were successful in bringing back new ideas that will slowly help to bring it on the Renaissance in Europe. So if you think about architecture, we have the Roman Colosseum, very massive stone building made with concrete. To the other side, we have Old St. Peter's Basilica on the right, that Basilican-style church. Over here is the Canterbury Cathedral, which is in England, one of the most northernmost cathedrals that we'll be talking about from the Romanesque era. This is the Santiago de Compostela. This is the church that was at the very end of those pilgrimage sites, and that's the relic container of what's left of St. James's relics. These are the major pilgrimage routes. Remember, I told you pilgrimage started out in Canterbury, went through some of the major cities of France, made your way through northern Spain, all the way into the west coast of Spain, where Santiago de Compostela is. So, what is the artistic influence? Now, this is what you want to write down. So, what are we using from Roman architecture in these Romanesque cathedrals? 1. Barrel and groin vaults will be incorporated again. So we saw barrel vaults. Barrel vaults were those semicircular roofs, okay? In ancient Rome, they were made of stone and later concrete. In Romanesque art, they will be made out of stone. It's odd, but essentially, after the fall of Rome, Europeans forgot how to use concrete. So we really won't see concrete until Gothic art. We're going to see the use of columns. We're going to see the use of piers, which are essentially, they're like columns, but they're larger and they're stronger to support the barrel vaults. Most of these cathedrals, they're no longer centrally planned, and they will all use the Basilican model, so that legacy continues. Like I said, no use of concrete, and they are building these cathedrals not only to handle the crowds of these pilgrimages that will be taking place, but they are also building it for the glory of God. All right. So, and not to place a stamp of like Roman authority. Remember, Rome built buildings to show that Rome was in power. Rome was all seeing. Now it's God is all seeing. And if we think about some of the newer features of a Romanesque cathedral, I would love you to take this image right now, push pause, draw it in your binder, and I will look for it when we come back. So the most important part of this entranceway, so this is a portal, this is a door going into a cathedral, is what I have circled there in blue. And the reason why this is important is because this is where you will see sculpture. Okay, so we didn't really see any sculpture in the exterior of Middle Age cathedrals. We saw mosaics on the inside, but now we're seeing sculpture for the first time on a large scale on the outside. So make sure you know what the tympanum is. We know what a lintel is. That goes all the way back to the Stonehenge. Make sure you know what a tremue is. A tremue is just a central pillar that holds up the entranceway between the two door jambs. We have a French word called a voussoir. Voussoirs are the stones that are shaped and angled to create the arch above the door. And then the archivolt is just really a name for this arch that goes across the top that's made out of stones. So again, draw this, draw the names. I'll be looking. So our first building that we are going to take a look at is in Caen, France, and that is where we will stop this video now that we have our intro and our background knowledge, and we will pick up in our next video with the pieces that you have to know for Romanesque art. So stay tuned, EHT Art History. We will continue.